Wade Burton was 38 years old, and until that Tuesday evening in September, he believed his marriage was the one thing in his life that couldn't be taken from him. He had built everything else with his own hands: a construction business, a reputation, a home, brick by brick, from nothing. His wife Portia was a hospital administrator, polished and composed, and Wade had loved her without condition for years. That evening, he came home from a job site to find her waiting at the kitchen island with a small gift bag and a smile he couldn't quite read. Inside was a pregnancy ultrasound, 14 weeks along. Portia watched his face carefully, looking for the reaction she expected. The joy, the tears, the overwhelmed, devoted husband she had always counted on. She found all of it. What she did not find, what she had no way of knowing, was that 3 years earlier, Wade had made a quiet, private medical decision he had never told her about. One that made what she was claiming to him absolutely, mathematically, impossible. Wade hugged his wife. He said all the right things. He poured 2 glasses of sparkling water and toasted her with a steady hand. And behind his eyes, something shifted permanently. She had no idea what she had just started. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. Wade Burton's boots left dusty prints on the welcome mat as he stepped through his front door, the evening air following him inside. His hands, calloused from years of honest work, automatically reached for the light switch, a habit from countless nights coming home late from job sites. But the kitchen lights were already on. Portia sat at the kitchen island, perfectly composed in a cream blouse and tailored pants, despite being home since 5. Her dark hair fell in careful waves around her shoulders, and her hands were folded neatly in front of a small silver gift bag. Wade noticed all of this the way he noticed everything, quietly, completely. "You're home early," he said, though he knew her schedule by heart. Tuesdays she usually worked until 6, unless there was a hospital board meeting. "I wanted to be here when you got back." Portia's smile held something he couldn't quite read. Wade moved through their kitchen with the familiarity of a man who spent most Friday nights cooking here, who knew which cabinet held Portia's favorite wine glasses and which drawer stuck slightly in humid weather. He'd fixed that drawer twice, but it still needed attention. Another item on his mental list. Her phone lay face down on the counter, as it always did these days. Wade had noticed this shift months ago, filed it away with other small changes. How she angled her body away when texting, how her laugh seemed to catch slightly when he asked about certain social events. All these details logged but not examined, like punch list items he wasn't ready to address. "How's the community center coming along?" Portia asked, her fingers tracing the edge of the gift bag. "On schedule," Wade replied, washing his hands at the sink. "The youth basketball court should be ready for painting by next week." He dried his hands on the kitchen towel, the one with lemons that Portia had bought during their weekend in Savannah last spring. "What's in the bag?" Portia's smile widened. "Come see." Wade moved to stand beside her, his work boots heavy against the tile floor. She reached into the silver bag with deliberate slowness and withdrew 2 items, a positive pregnancy test and a printed ultrasound dated 3 days prior. "I'm 14 weeks, she said softly. "I wanted to wait until I was sure, until everything was safe." Her hands smoothed the ultrasound printout. "I watched so many pregnancy announcement videos. I wanted it to be perfect." Wade felt his world shift on its axis, but his hands remained steady. He wrapped his arms around her, inhaled the familiar scent of her perfume. "I love you," he said, because that was still true, even as his mind began its cold arithmetic. 3 years ago, at 35, he'd had a vasectomy at Emory. Dr. Reginald Foster had performed the procedure on a Wednesday morning. Wade had scheduled it between projects, taken 2 days off to recover, and returned to work without fanfare. He and Portia had discussed children years ago, agreed to wait, and that waiting had quietly become never. He'd made a practical decision about his own body and simply never revisited the conversation. Not as a secret kept from malice, as a chapter he considered closed. He was not the father of this child. He was mathematically, medically, clinically incapable of being the father of this child. "Let me get us something to celebrate with," he said, moving to the refrigerator. His hands didn't shake as he poured 2 glasses of sparkling water. The bottles clinked gently as he returned them to the shelf. "To our family," he toasted, touching his glass to hers. Portia beamed, her free hand resting unconsciously on her stomach. Later that night, Wade lay beside his wife in their darkened bedroom. Her breathing had settled into the rhythm of sleep, but he remained perfectly still, staring at the ceiling. The crown molding he'd installed himself 3 summers ago cut a clean line against the darkness. He ran the math again, though he didn't need to. 14 weeks, 3 years. Numbers that refused to add up to anything but betrayal. The ceiling fan turned lazily above them, its shadow moving across the walls in a steady rotation. Wade watched it complete one full circle, then another, as his mind worked with the same quiet precision he applied to every blueprint, every contract, every foundation he'd ever laid. The alarm on Wade's phone buzzed at 5:30 a.m., a full hour before Portia usually stirred. He switched it off with practiced speed, the movement automatic after years of early job site starts. The bedroom was still dark, morning light just beginning to seep through the curtains he'd hung last spring. Wade dressed with deliberate quietness, work boots unlaced until he reached the hallway, belt collected from the dresser with careful hands. Portia's breathing remained steady, undisturbed. He paused at the doorway, watching her sleep for a moment. The same woman he'd married 6 years ago, looking exactly as peaceful as she had that first morning. The pain of that observation settled somewhere beneath his ribs, but his expression didn't change. The drive to his storage unit took 12 minutes in the pre-dawn quiet. Wade had rented it 3 years ago when they'd renovated the garage, claiming they needed the extra space for holiday decorations and old furniture. The truth was simpler. He liked having somewhere to keep things organized, documented, filed away until needed. Unit 147 opened with a metallic groan. Wade flicked on his phone's flashlight, though he knew exactly where everything was. The folder he needed sat in a filing cabinet against the back wall, labeled Personal Documents in his precise handwriting. Inside, birth certificate, marriage license, insurance papers, and there, the vasectomy records from Emory Hospital. He lifted the paperwork carefully, reading Dr. Reginald Foster's signature in the morning half-light. The date was clear: 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days ago. Wade photographed each page methodically, making sure every detail was legible. His hands remained steady, just as they did when documenting job site progress or filing permits. Back in his truck, Wade called Dr. Foster's office the moment their lines opened at 8 a.m. "Good morning," he said, voice even. "This is Wade Burton. I need to request my official procedure records from 3 years ago." He provided his date of birth, patient number, and insurance information with the same calm efficiency he used when ordering building materials. The drive to the Whitfield project site took 20 minutes. Otto's truck was already there, parked in its usual spot. Wade had known Otto Washington for 15 years, from back when Otto was still running his own electrical contracting business, and Wade was working out of a borrowed pickup with second-hand tools. They'd built their current company together, brick by careful brick. "Need your eyes on something," Wade said as he approached, gesturing toward the building's east wing. Otto nodded, falling into step beside him. They walked in silence until they reached an unfinished section, well away from the morning crew. Wade told him everything in 15 minutes: the pregnancy announcement, the vasectomy, the impossible math. Otto listened without interruption, his expression unchanging. When Wade finished, Otto asked exactly 3 questions. "You sure?" "Yes." How long? 3 years. Otto nodded slowly. Okay. So, what do you need from me? That evening, Wade returned home at his usual time. He helped Portia with dinner prep, chopping vegetables while she told him about her day at the hospital. He asked about her symptoms, rubbed her shoulders when she mentioned back pain, and suggested they start looking at nursery paint colors soon. All while his mind worked through the past 12 months with architectural precision. The business trip to Atlanta that Portia had extended by a day, citing a hospital administration conference. The cousin's wedding in Savannah that Wade had missed due to a critical project deadline. Portia had gone alone, stayed the whole weekend. Her phone, always face down now, always carried even for short trips to the mailbox. And Bryce Aldridge, her cousin's husband's younger brother. The real estate developer who seemed to materialize at every family gathering lately, who always had a new project to discuss, who looked at Wade with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Wade remembered them talking at Gloria's birthday dinner last month, heads bent close over some shared joke. When they went to bed that night, Wade lay still in the darkness, mentally arranging every observation like items on a punch list. The late-night texts she thought he hadn't noticed. The sudden interest in real estate investment conversations. The way Bryce always seemed to know Portia's schedule, which tables they'd be at during family events, which conversations to join. He filed each detail away with the same careful attention he gave to every blueprint he'd ever drawn, every foundation he'd ever poured. There was no panic, no spiral of emotion. There was only the quiet, methodical work of a man who had spent his life building things that lasted, who knew exactly how to examine structural failures, who understood that the most important step in any project was proper planning. Wade's phone buzzed at 6 a.m. Otto's text was brief. Got that number you needed? Call when ready. He waited until he was alone in his truck, parked at the lumber supplier while his crew loaded materials. The investigator answered on the second ring. Her voice was clipped, professional, the tone of someone who understood that details mattered more than conversation. Mr. Washington explained your situation, she said. 2 weeks of targeted surveillance, documentation of patterns and interactions, 5,000 flat rate, results guaranteed discreet. Do you want to proceed? Wade confirmed payment terms and provided the essential information: names, addresses, likely locations. He didn't elaborate beyond necessity. The investigator didn't ask for more than she needed. That evening, he cooked dinner while Portia talked about work, hospital budget meetings, staffing concerns, the usual administrative challenges. He noticed how she checked her phone during natural pauses in conversation, the slight shift in her expression when certain messages arrived. He filed each observation away without comment. The next week moved in carefully maintained normalcy. Wade left for job sites early, came home on time, asked about her symptoms, and rubbed her feet while they watched TV. When Portia mentioned her 16-week checkup, he immediately offered to attend. Really? Her smile carried genuine warmth. You don't have to adjust your schedule. Of course I'll be there, he said, and meant it. The truth required documentation. The OB's office was painted in soothing blues and greens. Wade sat beside Portia during the ultrasound, held her hand as they listened to the heartbeat. He asked appropriate questions about development milestones. When the doctor stepped out briefly to take a call, he turned to Portia with carefully crafted casualness. I was reading about all these new genetic screening options, he said, tone curious and engaged. There's non-invasive prenatal paternity testing now. Can check everything super early, just for peace of mind. Should we ask about that? Portia's hand tightened slightly in his. Oh, we don't need that, she said quickly. Everything's perfectly fine. Wade smiled, nodded, and changed the subject. But he had what he needed. Her reaction, the testing information, and confirmation that it was available if necessary. That evening, his phone buzzed with a message from the investigator. Results ready. Location preference? They met in a quiet coffee shop across town. The investigator handed him a sealed envelope without preamble. Everything's documented chronologically. Credit card records traced through the vendor connection Mr. Washington provided. Hotel receipts, timestamps, photographs. Call if you need clarification on anything. Wade drove to the Home Depot parking lot, chosen for its anonymity and good lighting. Inside the envelope, 14 months of carefully organized evidence. A credit card trail showing regular charges at a hotel in Buckhead. Room service receipts for 2. And 4 photographs that left no room for misinterpretation. Portia and Bryce Aldridge together, entering and leaving the hotel on different dates. Their body language spoke volumes. The familiarity in their movements suggested long practice at these meetings. He studied each document with the same attention he gave to building permits and contract reviews. The dates aligned with business trips, family events, weekend conferences. A pattern emerged. Regular meetings disguised as professional obligations, family gatherings used as cover, hotel charges buried in business expenses. Wade opened his phone's notes app. At the top, he typed 2 words in capital letters: controlled demolition. Below that, he began a list. 1. Secure all documentation. Medical records, surveillance, financial. 2. Contact business attorney, R2. Company protection. 3. Find divorce attorney. Through business contacts, not family network. 4. Document all joint accounts and assets. 5. Begin separation of business finances. 6. Maintain normal routine until everything is in place. He reviewed the list 3 times, adding detail notes under each item. The parking lot had grown darker, but he barely noticed. This was familiar territory. Planning and sequencing, ensuring every step was properly ordered before beginning execution. Finally, Wade started his truck and drove home. The house lights were on, warm and welcoming against the evening sky. He could see Portia moving around in the kitchen through the window he'd installed last summer. He walked inside, body relaxed, expression natural. "Something smells good," he said, hanging his keys on their usual hook. Portia turned from the stove, smiling. "Just trying that new recipe you mentioned." She had no idea that everything had changed, that the foundation she thought was solid had already begun its calculated collapse. Diane Morrow's office occupied the 4th floor of a renovated brick building downtown. The reception area was minimal. No fancy artwork or elaborate fixtures. Wade appreciated that. It matched what his business attorney had told him about her. Precise, direct, focused on results rather than appearance. She greeted him with a firm handshake and led him to a conference room rather than her personal office. Another detail that registered: this was about work, not comfort. "Mark spoke highly of you," she said, referring to his business attorney. "He mentioned you have documentation to review?" Wade placed his folder on the table and began laying out documents in chronological order. Vasectomy records from Dr. Foster, the surveillance photographs, credit card statements showing the hotel patterns, and his complete marital financial records. "I need everything protected," he said simply. "Business and personal." Diane studied the vasectomy records first, noting dates and details. She examined the surveillance photographs without comment, though her eyebrow raised slightly at the timestamps showing the pattern over 14 months. When she reached the financial documentation, her attention sharpened. "You maintain organized records," she said, appreciation evident in her tone. "That makes this next part easier." She began sorting through bank statements, investment accounts, and joint savings records with practiced efficiency. After several minutes of focused review, she placed a document on the table between them. "Look at these transactions," she said, indicating a series of transfers from their joint savings. "They're structured to avoid attention, never large enough to trigger notifications, spaced irregularly, but averaging every 2 to 3 weeks. They lead to an account I don't see listed in your joint holdings." Wade leaned forward, studying the pattern she'd identified. The transfers had begun 18 months ago. 4 months after Bryce had started appearing more frequently at family gatherings. Each movement was indeed modest enough to avoid obvious notice. $500 here, $750 there. Occasionally smaller amounts that looked like regular bill payments. "She's been building a separate account," Diane explained, though Wade had already done the math. "Using your joint savings as a funding source. Moving money gradually enough to avoid raising flags. The total so far is significant, just over $40,000. Wade sat with this information, his expression unchanged. Inside, he felt a peculiar kind of clarity, like watching a blueprint reveal its true structural flaws under proper inspection. "She wasn't just having an affair," Diane continued. "She was constructing an exit strategy, using your trust as the financial foundation. The timing suggests she began planning this shortly after the relationship with Mr. Aldridge intensified." Wade nodded once, processing. "What's the next step?" "We document everything without alerting her," Diane said. "No confrontation, no behavior changes, no indication you're aware of any of this. We need her to maintain her current patterns while we prepare the filing properly." She began making notes in precise handwriting. "I'll have my team trace the destination account and monitor for additional transfers. We'll need updated statements from all joint holdings." "You want me to just continue like normal?" Wade asked, though he already understood the strategy. "Exactly," Diane confirmed. "Think of it like one of your construction projects. We're in the preparation phase. You don't start visible work until everything's properly permitted and positioned. Right now, we gather documentation, protect your business assets, and build our case methodically." The construction analogy landed perfectly. Wade had spent his career understanding that proper preparation prevented structural failure. "I'll draft initial protection documents for your review by Friday," Diane continued. "In the meantime, maintain absolute normalcy at home. No changes to accounts, no unusual withdrawals, nothing that might make her accelerate her timeline." Wade gathered the documents back into his folder with careful precision. "How long until we're ready to file?" "Given the complexity and what we need to document, 4 to 6 weeks. I'll need your patience." She fixed him with a direct look. "Can you maintain normal routine that long?" "Yes," Wade said simply. He had spent 3 months already living with knowledge he never showed. This was just more foundation. Diane stood, extending her hand. "We'll proceed carefully and thoroughly. Your business attorney was right. You understand the value of doing things properly the first time." Wade drove from her office to his largest active job site, the community center renovation. He spent the afternoon reviewing subcontractor work, checking material deliveries, and addressing the normal challenges of any major project. He spoke with his crew, signed paperwork, and made decisions about timeline adjustment. Not once did he mention the meeting or give any indication that he'd done anything but normal business that morning. The folder stayed locked in his truck, its contents filed away in his mind like measurements on a blueprint, waiting for the right moment to be used. The next 2 weeks settled into a rhythm of careful normality. Wade woke each morning at 5:30, made coffee the way Portia liked it, medium roast, touch of cream, no sugar, and left a fresh cup on her bedside table before heading to his job sites. He kept track of her prenatal appointments in his phone calendar, setting quiet reminders that looked like any other husband's devotion. When she mentioned morning sickness lasting into the afternoon, he started keeping crackers and ginger ale in his truck for their drives together. Their kitchen counter accumulated pregnancy books and pamphlets from her doctor's office. Wade would find Portia reading them in the evenings, her feet propped up, making small sounds of interest at various details. He'd ask what she'd learned, and she'd share facts about fetal development or recommended vitamins. He'd nod and ask follow-up questions, his voice warm and interested. "The baby's about the size of an avocado now," she told him one evening, looking up from her reading. "Isn't that amazing?" "That is something," Wade agreed, sliding a glass of water across the counter to her. He'd read that hydration was important during pregnancy. She smiled at the gesture. On Thursday, they attended a baby shower for one of Portia's hospital colleagues. Wade carried gifts, shook hands with husbands he'd met at previous work functions, and participated in the standard jokes about midnight cravings and impending sleepless nights. He watched Portia accept congratulations from her co-workers, her hand resting naturally on her growing belly. She seemed more relaxed lately, more certain of her footing. Wade noticed how she'd stopped checking her phone quite so obsessively, how her smiles came easier. She was settling into what she believed was security. The following Sunday brought them to Gloria's house for her nephew's birthday dinner. Extended family filled the dining room and spilled onto the back deck, paper plates balanced on knees, conversations overlapping. Wade worked the room with easy courtesy, exchanging greetings and updates on his latest projects. Bryce Aldridge arrived an hour in, all confidence and casual designer clothes. He moved through the crowd with practiced charm, stopping to chat with various relatives, working his way gradually toward where Wade stood. "Wade, good to see you." Bryce extended his hand, grip firm, smile perfect. "Heard about that community center contract? Impressive work." Wade shook his hand with matching pressure, his expression pleasant and opaque. "Appreciate that. How's the development business?" "Can't complain," Bryce replied, though Wade knew from Otto's research exactly how much he could complain about, if he were being honest. "Market's been interesting lately." They exchanged a few more minutes of surface-level conversation before Bryce drifted away toward another group. Wade noticed how carefully casual the interaction had been, exactly the right amount of friendly distance between brothers-in-law who saw each other at family functions. Later, as the party began winding down, Wade stepped inside to use the bathroom. On his way back through the hallway, he heard low voices from the kitchen. He paused, recognizing Portia's tone, the slightly higher pitch she used when she was trying to sound reassuring. "He doesn't know," she was saying. "He'll never know. Just give me until after the baby and I'll sort it." "You're sure?" Bryce's voice, carrying an edge of tension Wade had never heard in his usual smooth delivery. "I'm sure," Portia replied. "Wade doesn't question things. He trusts me completely. That's never been our problem." Wade stood perfectly still in the hallway, letting the words settle like dust after demolition. "She doesn't know what she doesn't know," he thought. The clarity of it was almost peaceful. He moved quietly back toward the deck, before either of them emerged from the kitchen. Outside, he rejoined a conversation about the Falcons' defensive line with Portia's Uncle Marcus, his contribution to the discussion never wavering. When it was time to leave, Wade helped Gloria gather empty plates and solo cups, accepted her Tupperware container of leftover birthday cake, and hugged her goodbye with genuine warmth. Portia kissed her mother's cheek, promised to call about lunch later in the week. The drive home unwound in comfortable silence, broken occasionally by Portia's comments about various family updates she'd gathered at the party. Wade kept one hand on the wheel, responding with appropriate interest when needed, his expression as unreadable as the dark road ahead. The construction site hummed with early morning activity as Wade pulled his truck into the graveled lot. Otto's vehicle was already there, parked in its usual spot near the temporary office trailer. The sun hadn't fully cleared the horizon yet, casting long shadows across stacks of lumber and pallets of concrete blocks. Wade found Otto doing his morning walkthrough, clipboard in hand, checking measurements against the day's objectives. They fell into step together naturally, the way men do after years of working side by side. "Framing crews running ahead of schedule," Otto mentioned, marking something on his clipboard. "Might need to adjust the electrical timeline." They discussed work details for several minutes, moving between exposed beams and partial walls. Other workers nodded respectfully as they passed. To anyone watching, it looked exactly like any other project consultation between partners. When they reached a quiet corner of the site, Otto's tone shifted slightly. Got some information you need to hear. He pulled a folded paper from his back pocket. Remember that vendor connection I mentioned? The one who works with most of the developers in the area? Wade nodded, his expression unchanging. Bryce Aldridge's situation is interesting, Otto continued, unfolding the paper. He's got outstanding loans in Fulton, DeKalb, and Cobb counties. Been borrowing against his family name for the better part of 10 years. 2 current development projects showing serious red flags. Missing investor draws, pushed timelines, the kind of pattern that makes people nervous. Wade absorbed this quietly, filing it away. Useful information, but not his primary concern. There's more, Otto said, his voice carrying a weight that made Wade look up. About Darnell. Wade's brother-in-law's name landed differently than Bryce's had. Wade had given Darnell work on 3 separate projects when he needed it, had written him solid recommendations, had sat with him through his divorce 2 years ago, offering support and steady work when Darnell's world was shaking. Just 3 months ago, Wade had spoken at Darnell's daughter Tanya's graduation party, talking about her potential and the importance of family. He knew, Otto said simply, from the beginning. Was present for at least 2 early meetings at the Buckhead Hotel. Provided cover with Gloria when Portia needed alibis. Told you himself she was staying at Gloria's that night of Bryce's birthday party. Wade stood absolutely still. The construction site noise continued around them. Nail guns firing, saws whining, trucks backing up with warning beepers, but it all seemed to come from very far away. You're certain? Wade asked, his voice level. Otto nodded. Got it confirmed through 3 separate sources. He was an active participant in the deception, Wade, all while taking your paychecks and sitting at your table. Wade looked out across the site, his eyes finding the area where Darnell's crew was supposed to be starting drywall work later that week. The betrayal felt different than Portia's somehow. More personal, quieter. Pull him off the Whitfield project, Wade said finally, his tone even. Standard end-of-contract paperwork. Clean. Already prepared, Otto replied, pulling another document from his clipboard. Just needs your signature. Wade took the paper, read it carefully, thorough even now, and signed his name in steady strokes. The document was perfectly ordinary. A standard completion of contract terms, the kind of paperwork that crossed his desk weekly. Nothing in it suggested personal grievance or retaliation. Just business, concluded professionally. They walked the rest of the site, discussing actual work matters. Otto pointed out some potential issues with the ventilation system layout. Wade made notes about adjusting the schedule for the concrete pour. They were builders, after all. The work continued. Later, driving home alone, Wade felt the weight of Darnell's betrayal settle into his bones. It was different than processing Portia's infidelity or Bryce's arrogance. This was about shared meals and trust freely given. About Darnell's daughter Tanya hugging Wade at her graduation party, thanking him for the opportunities he'd given her father. About conversations over lunch breaks and job sites. Real conversations between men who believed they were friends. Traffic moved slowly through the afternoon heat. Wade watched other cars merge and exit, each driver lost in their own private world of concerns and calculations. He wondered how many of them were also sitting with betrayals, carrying weights they never expected to bear. The sun was setting as Wade turned onto his street, casting everything in that particular Georgia golden hour light that made even ordinary things look significant. He parked in his driveway, turned off the engine, and sat for a moment in the gathering dusk. The medical office building stood quiet in the early morning light, most suites still dark. Wade sat in his truck, reviewing the information Diane had provided. Her contact, a discreet medical technician who understood the sensitivity of the situation, would arrive at 7:30. No unnecessary questions would be asked. Wade checked his watch. 7:15. He'd told Portia he had an early supplier meeting, kissed her goodbye while she was still half asleep. The lie felt clean in his mouth. mechanical, like reading measurements from a blueprint. The technician arrived exactly on time, a professional woman in her 50s who simply nodded when Wade introduced himself. She had already been briefed by Diane's office. Inside the quiet medical suite, she explained the process with clinical efficiency. The non-invasive prenatal paternity test would compare DNA from the developing fetus, obtained through Portia's routine blood work, which Wade had access to as her husband, against Wade's sample. Results typically take 7 to 10 business days, she said, preparing the blood draw materials. We'll expedite this one. Should have answers by Friday. Wade rolled up his sleeve. The needles slid in smoothly. He watched his blood fill the collection tube, thinking about foundations and load-bearing walls, about structures that look solid until you test what's underneath. By 8:15, he was back in his truck. He had a text from Otto about a concrete delivery schedule and another from Portia asking if he'd pick up ginger ale on his way home. He responded to both with his usual promptness. The next phase required precision. Wade spent the morning with his business attorney, reviewing the restructuring documents Diane had already examined for marital asset implications. Everything was legitimate. His construction company predated the marriage, and removing Portia's name from certain accounts was simply good business practice. The paperwork was clean, proper, and would hold up under any scrutiny. "Sign here and here," his attorney indicated. "Initial these pages." Wade read every document carefully before signing. He had built his reputation on attention to detail. He wouldn't abandon that principle now. The week moved with deliberate normality. Wade supervised job sites, attended a planning commission meeting about the Whitfield project, and maintained his usual domestic routines. He made Portia's favorite pasta on Wednesday night, listened to her talk about hospital administration politics, asked the right questions at the right moments. Friday morning, his phone buzzed during a site inspection. The test results were ready. He drove to the medical office during his lunch break. The same technician handed him a sealed envelope without ceremony. Wade sat in his truck, opened it, and read the contents with the same careful attention he gave to material specifications and contract terms. The results were exactly what he knew they would be. He was not the biological father. The fetal DNA profile showed clear markers consistent with another male contributor. Wade didn't need the additional page comparing those markers to the reference sample they'd obtained from items in Bryce's office trash. He already knew, but now he had documentation. Official, medical, admissible documentation. He looked at the results for precisely 4 seconds before sliding them into his folder. The folder went into his briefcase. The briefcase went onto the passenger's. Each motion precise, measured, necessary. That evening, after dinner was cleared and Portia was answering emails on her laptop, Wade made a phone call. "Gloria? It's Wade." He kept his voice warm, natural. "How are you?" His mother-in-law's pleasure came through clearly. She had always liked Wade, appreciated his stability, and the way he treated her daughter. He listened to her updates about church activities and her garden renovation. "Actually," he said when she paused, "I was hoping we could come to dinner soon. Saturday, maybe? There's something I'd like your guidance on. You know I've always valued your counsel." Gloria's response was immediate and delighted. "Of course! I'll cook that chicken you like. The one with the rosemary." "That would be wonderful," Wade said, meaning it. He had always enjoyed Gloria's cooking, her careful attention to details that made people feel considered. "Thank you." After hanging up, he returned to the living room where Portia sat with her laptop. "Just talk to your mother," he said casually. "Made dinner plans for Saturday. That work for you?" Portia looked up and smiled. That same smile she'd given him for years, the one he used to believe meant something different than what it meant now. "Of course. Mom's been wanting to have us over. She's probably excited about the baby." "Probably," Wade agreed, settling into his armchair with the newspaper. He turned pages with steady hands, letting Portia return to her emails, letting her believe this was just another quiet evening in their marriage. Above the newspaper, he watched her type, her face illuminated by the screen's blue glow. She had no idea what was coming. She didn't know that every foundation she thought she was standing on had already been carefully, methodically removed. The evening air was crisp as Wade and Portia pulled up to Gloria Aldridge's brick two-story home. Through the windows, warm light spilled onto the manicured lawn. Gloria had planted new flowers since their last visit. Purple petunias lined the walkway, carefully spaced. Wade helped Portia from the car, one hand steady at her elbow. She was showing now at 6 months. Her blue dress fitted carefully over the curve of her belly. She smiled at him, that same smile he'd watched across their kitchen table for months, while he gathered his evidence, while he built his case. Gloria opened the door before they reached it, wrapped Portia in a careful hug, then embraced Wade with genuine warmth. "Come in, come in. Everything's ready." The house smelled of rosemary and garlic, Gloria's signature chicken, the one she made for special occasions. The dining room table was set properly with her good china, water glasses filled, cloth napkins folded precisely. Gloria had always been particular about these details. "Wade, help me with the serving dishes?" Gloria called from the kitchen. He joined her, accepting warm ceramic bowls of roasted vegetables and garlic mashed potatoes. She had made his favorites. The weight of that kindness settled in his chest. Dinner passed easily. Wade asked about Gloria's garden renovation. Portia shared stories from the hospital. Gloria refilled water glasses and insisted on second helpings. It was the kind of evening they'd shared dozens of times before. Comfortable, warm, familiar. Only Wade knew it was the last one they would have like this. After the plates were cleared, Gloria brought coffee. Wade watched her pour into delicate cups, her movements precise and practiced. She had always appreciated order, structure, things done properly. It was one of the reasons he'd chosen this setting, this moment. "Gloria," he said once she was seated, his voice gentle, "I want to thank you for something." She looked up, smiling. "What's that?" "For always treating me like family, for welcoming me the way you have." He meant every word. "I need you to know I mean that, before I show you some things that are going to be difficult to see." The smile faded slightly from Gloria's face. Beside him, Portia shifted in her chair. Wade opened his briefcase and removed the folder he'd assembled with the same care he gave to construction proposals. He placed it on the table and began laying out documents in careful sequence. "This is my vasectomy record from Emory, dated 3 years ago. The first page, clean and official. This is the follow-up confirmation of sterility. The second page. This is a prenatal paternity test from last week." He continued methodically, his voice steady and clear. "These are credit card records for a hotel in Buckhead, spanning 14 months. And these," he laid down the photographs last, "are from the hotel's security cameras." Portia's face went through transitions like weather. Confusion first, genuine confusion, because she had never imagined Wade capable of this level of preparation. Then denial, her voice rising. "These are fake. He's making this up." "Mom," she turned to Gloria, who was studying the photographs with terrible focus. "Don't believe this. He's trying to control me. He's always been controlling. You just never saw it." But Gloria was looking at the credit card statements now, at Bryce's name repeated month after month. She was seeing her daughter's signature on hotel receipts, dates and times laid out in clean columns. She was a woman who had built her life on careful attention to detail. The details were all here. Wade sat quietly, while Portia's accusations filled the room. He didn't defend himself. He didn't need to. When her voice finally faltered, he spoke with the same calm precision he'd used to lay out the documents. "I had a vasectomy 3 years ago. The child isn't mine. I've known since the night you told me. I wasn't ready then. I'm ready now." The room went absolutely still. Gloria set her coffee cup down with a soft click against the saucer. Her eyes moved over Bryce's name in the documentation again. Bryce, who was family, who had sat at this very table for holidays and birthdays. Something crossed her face that held both grief and fury in equal measure. Portia looked at her mother's expression and understood, finally, that she had lost the last ground she had to stand on in this room. The morning sun hadn't fully cleared the Atlanta skyline when Wade's phone buzzed. Diane's text was simple: filed. All documentation included. He set his coffee mug down on the granite countertop of his guest suite kitchen, a space Portia had never seen in the property she didn't know he owned through his business. His phone started ringing before he finished reading the court filing notification. Portia's name lit up the screen. He set it face down and went to work. By sunset, she had called 41 times. Each call went to voicemail. Each voicemail grew progressively more desperate, starting with anger, moving through confusion, landing finally in a kind of pleading that might have moved him 6 months ago. Now it was just noise. The guest suite was spare but comfortable. He had moved essential items there gradually over the past month. Clothes, documents, his grandfather's watch. Nothing that would tip Portia off. Nothing that would disrupt his timeline. The property was a small commercial complex he'd purchased through the business 18 months ago. The upstairs unit renovated as a residence. He'd mentioned neither the purchase nor the renovation to Portia. She had never asked about his business operations beyond the surface level. The family network moved faster than the legal system. By Wednesday morning, Bryce Aldridge knew about the filing. His first move was predictably self-protective. He stopped answering Portia's calls, canceled his appearance at a family dinner, and told his brother they needed to let things settle before any further contact. Portia, watching her carefully constructed world collapse, made her first genuinely strategic decision. With her hidden account frozen in discovery and Wade's assets legally cordoned off through the business restructuring, she faced financial freefall. The divorce petition included full documentation of her financial misconduct. She had no leverage left. So she did the one thing Bryce never expected. She formally named him as the biological father in the divorce proceedings. The paternity filing just landed. Diane texted Wade. She's also filing for child support. Emergency hearing requested. Wade read the message at a job site, nodded once, and returned to reviewing lumber delivery schedules. Bryce contested paternity immediately. His instincts were purely defensive, honed by years of avoiding consequences. The court ordered testing. The results matched the private test Wade had already documented. There was nowhere left to contest. The child support calculation was a precision weapon. The court looked at Bryce's represented income, his lifestyle expenses, his professional claims to investors. The monthly figure that emerged was substantial. Bryce's attorney attempted to argue it down. The court was unmoved. The order was filed. Otto made one phone call, not to Bryce, but to a mutual contact in commercial development. A casual mention of Bryce's complicated personal situation reached his most skeptical investor within hours. The investor, already uncertain about missing project deadlines, began asking pointed questions about financial stability. Bryce's largest pending deal began to unravel like a poorly tied knot. He's trying to restructure the financing, Otto reported, sitting on a tailgate after a long Friday. Nobody's returning his calls. Wade nodded and turned back to his blueprint review. Darnell Aldridge, facing his own financial pressure after losing the Whitfield project, went to Portia with his hand out. He had covered for her, he reminded her. He had lied to Wade's face. That was worth something, but Portia's accounts were frozen in discovery. She had nothing liquid to offer him. When she explained this, Darnell's expression shifted from expectant to threatening. He had details about the affair that weren't in Wade's documentation, he told her. He could tell Gloria everything. His version. The full version. Go ahead, Portia said tiredly. There's nothing left to protect. Gloria called Wade once, 10 days after the dinner. Her voice was steady, but carried the weight of something permanent. "I respect how you handled this," she said simply. "You did it right." "Thank you," Wade replied, and meant it. They both knew it was goodbye. The first child support check was due in 30 days. Bryce's first investor meeting with new potential backers was scheduled for the following week. Portia's hidden account remained frozen in discovery. Darnell wasn't speaking to anyone in the family. Wade walked through his job sites, reviewed his contracts, and built his new life with the same careful attention he gave to every foundation he'd ever poured. The work was the work. He did it properly. The divorce decree landed without fanfare on a Tuesday morning. Wade signed where indicated, his signature as steady as it had been on every contract he'd ever executed. The settlement terms were comprehensive: the house, the business assets, equitable distribution that fully reflected Portia's documented financial misconduct. Diane had built an airtight case. The judge had reviewed the evidence. The math was the math. 18 months passed like weather. Wade stood now on raw land he'd purchased after selling the marital home, 10 acres with good drainage and a view of the tree line. The foundation was fresh poured, perfect corners and proper depth. He'd done the work himself on weekends, taking his time, checking every measurement twice. No rushing, no cutting corners. Build it right, or don't build it at all. His company had grown. Otto's municipal connections had landed them a city contract for affordable housing development. 28 units, good margins, steady work for a crew that had expanded to 22. Wade's name was on a building downtown now, clean letters on brushed metal. Burton Construction. He'd walked past it once, noticed it without fanfare, and gone to check his job sites. He was seeing someone, a real estate attorney he'd met through a mutual contractor friend. It was new, uncomplicated, and deliberately slow. They had dinner sometimes. They talked about work. Neither of them needed it to be more than it was yet. That wasn't the point of any of this anyway. Across town, Portia and Bryce's attempt at proximity had combusted exactly the way Otto predicted. They'd tried for 3 months after the divorce. Awkward handoffs in parking lots, tense conversations about schedules, mutual performance of maturity neither of them possessed. It ended in a Target parking lot on a Sunday afternoon, voices raised, words that couldn't be unsaid. Now they communicated through attorneys and scheduling apps. Their conversations, when absolutely necessary, were the same argument on infinite loop. Who was more responsible? Who lost more? Who betrayed whom first? The argument never resolved because neither of them had the capacity to absorb their share of the truth. Bryce had relocated to Charlotte, believing distance would reset his possibilities. But reputation moved faster than real estate developers in the Southeast. The investor who'd pulled out of his Atlanta deal had connections. Professional networks had memories. He found himself in smaller offices, having longer waits, getting fewer returns on his calls. He worked property management now. No development deals, no investor meetings, showing units to potential tenants, handling maintenance requests, writing monthly reports to owners who didn't know his name. The child support check was due every month, regardless of his cash flow or his diminished circumstances. He'd been late twice in the first year. Portia's attorney filed enforcement paperwork within hours both times. The second late payment triggered an automatic wage garnishment, the final insult for a man who had built his entire identity on the appearance of ease and affluence. The garnishment paperwork went to his employer. There was no talking his way around it. Darnell worked for another contractor now, across town on smaller jobs. Wade heard about him sometimes through the trade network, nothing specific. Just the quiet ripple of a man carrying the weight of having chosen the wrong loyalties. He had stopped trying to explain himself to Gloria. Some doors stayed closed. The sun was setting on a long Friday when Otto pulled up to Wade's property in his work truck. They sat on the tailgate, 2 bottles of water between them, looking at the foundation Wade had poured. "Heard something about Bryce?" Otto said, in the casual way he always delivered information. "Through Marcus over at Capital Property Group. Said he's working as a leasing manager now, showing apartments, writing maintenance tickets." Wade nodded once, taking a slow drink of water. He didn't celebrate, didn't comment. The information simply was what it was. "Foundation looks good," Otto said after a moment, nodding at Wade's work. "Checked it 3 times," Wade replied. "No rushing corners." The frame of what would eventually be the front door stood open to the tree line, nothing blocking the view in any direction. Wade set his water bottle down and picked up his tool belt. There was more work to do before dark. He had the time to do it right. Otto watched him move toward the lumber stack with the same steady purpose he'd shown on every job site for 15 years. Some men rushed foundation work, tried to skip to the visible parts. Wade never had. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.